Okay, so today we are going to study the first lesson of Footprints Without Feet. The first lesson is A Triumph of Surgery. This story is written by James Herriot. James Herriot, as we know, he's a well-known veterinary surgeon. So he has written mostly books about animals whom he had treated throughout his life. So this is a very funny story about a small dog called Tricky. So let's read and find out. I'll be explaining the meanings in between, so please mark those words. I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. He had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage, with legs at each corner. His eyes bloodshot and rheumy. Well, here we are talking about a dog called Tricky who's become extremely fat due to overfeeding and over-caring mistress of his. And as we will come to know, the mistress is Mrs. Pomfrey. Okay, so now as the doctor sees Tricky on the road, he finds him to be immensely fat, and he was visibly looking sick. Tricky stared straight ahead and his tongue lolled from his jaw. You must have seen dogs when they pant with their tongues sticking out of their jaw. Mrs. Pomfrey hastened to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Harriet. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. So I have been giving him some extras between the meals to build him up. Some malt, some cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much, really. So you can see that how she's been overfeeding her dog. And did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? The doctor asked. Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak. I had to relent. Relent means to stop. He does love cream cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. I looked down again at the little dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle any meal at any hour of the day or night, and I wondered about how all things Mrs. Pomfrey hadn't mentioned. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see, but Hodgkin, the gardener, has been down with lumbago. Now, lumbago is a kind of back pain. So there has been no ring throwing lately. I tried to sound severe. Now, I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he's going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on very strict diet. Mrs. Pomfrey wrung her hands. Wrung is this kind of gesture. Oh, I will, Mr. Harriet. I'm sure you're right. But it is so very difficult. She set off, head down along the road as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Regime is routine. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along with his little tweed coat. Tottering is walking unsteadily. He had a wardrobe of these coats for cold weather and a raincoat for wet days. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pomfrey. So the veterinary doctor, as we can see, was aware that Tricky was not doing well, and he would soon be doing very badly, and his services would be called forth very soon. So the expected call came within few days. Mrs. Pomfrey was distraught. Distraught means to be very worried. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on the rug, panting. Panting means breathing heavily. Didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. The poor lady almost swooned. Swooned means she almost fainted at the news. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. Pine is to be extremely sad. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pomfrey's wailings, I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. Wailings means complaints. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out bringing his daybed, his nightbed, favorite cushions, toys, and rubber rings, and breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. So you can realize how they have been spoiling the little creature with every kind of comfort a person can think of. Realizing that my car would never hold all that stuff, I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pomfrey, with a despairing cry, a very sad cry, threw an armful of little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears, so they must love the little dog so much. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat. Gasping again is breathing heavily. He was so fat he could hardly breathe. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. So you can see even wagging his tail takes him a lot of effort. Poor old lad, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. You haven't a kick means you haven't got much life in you. You're completely very sick. But the doctor thought he surely knew a cure for the dog. Okay, so we would stop here, and here are a few questions we need to discuss. Is the narrator as rich as Tricky's mistress? Till now, we have not come across any evidence of the narrator being rich. However, Tricky's mistress seemed to be really, really rolling. How does he treat the dog? He treats the dog, what I feel, is like any of his other patients. So he treats him like a normal dog, not the special ones as Mrs. Pomfrey projects. Why is he tempted to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest? Well, that part will come later on in the lesson. We will not discuss it now. Why does Mrs. Pomfrey think the dog's recovery is a triumph of surgery? Well, we can see how bad Tricky's condition is. So if he recovers from that condition, that must be a really great breakthrough. So that's all for now. We will come up with the rest of the lesson next time.